This is something to be incredibly proud of. There is nothing like this in the plant-based world. Like, this is a tremendous accomplishment to be able to make such amazing food products. I mean, I want to eat all of those things. And who thought you could have like a foie gras burger and have zero guilt about it, like in this decade? But here we are. We can do that in 2022.
Happy Friday. Hope you're doing well. In this video, I want to go through a talk by Justin Kolbeck. He's the co-founder and CEO of Wildtype. They're a company that's making cultivated salmon. Full link is in the description if you want to see the full talk. And it's hosted by the Cultured Meat Symposium Conference / Future Food Show podcast. And if you're interested in cellular agriculture, highly recommend you check out that full podcast. They interview a lot of people in this space and really are the go-to. So I want to go through his video because he really sets the stage for where the market is today. And it's important for investors to really understand where we are and where we're going in the next decade. Let's get into that video. Before we get into the video, I do just want to congratulate anyone who's been buying shares in Cult Food Science over the past few months. As of now, we're up to 8 cents a share. If you bought back at the lowest on November 11th, you'll be up 300%. Huge congratulations. I think we're just getting started. I think this is a long-term investment. Think funds that are typically 7 to 10 years. So I'm going to be holding this for a long time. But really, if you bought at the lowest of the low in the past few months, you'll already be doing very well. So huge congratulations. Now let's get into the talk from Justin.
What does a world look like where a lot of the companies that are represented in this room wildly succeed as businesses, but maybe collectively we fail to achieve the big mission that I think we all set out to do? And that's the theme I want to explore today. To give us all a little bit of motivation, this is data that we all know. So if you think about where the biggest reductions in carbon are going to come from, it's not industry, it's not buildings, it's not electricity, it's food.
I don't think this graph takes into account deploying 100% renewable energy generation and storage, or adding in new building technologies that can reduce drastically our energy usage in buildings. But the point stands, food production is a huge emissions generator.
We all know that. And I wanted to highlight this little thing on the bottom here as a call to action. So the IPCC has basically decided that we're not worth thinking about. We're a rounding error in terms of being able to turn the tide on carbon emissions in food. And I want to challenge us today to think about pushing back on that and come up with a way that we can maybe go a little bit faster, have a bigger impact in this decade. The gray line here is CPI with 1982 kind of baselined at 100, and in red are inflation-adjusted salmon prices, basically. So the point on this slide is that it is now basically 5 times more expensive to buy salmon than it was inflation-adjusted even 11 or 12 years ago. And what that means is that one of the world's healthiest forms of protein that we can have is increasingly becoming inaccessible. And by the way, I have the same chart for beef, and it looks exactly the same. So if you play this tape forward, we're thinking about a world where only the wealthiest people can afford the most nutrient-dense types of animal proteins. And I don't know about you, but I say no thank you to that future. So let's make some assumptions together. The cost of an industrial-scale cultivated meat facility is upwards of $100 million, based on our experience. So far, about 5 firms have raised that much money. Let's assume, generously, in the next 5 years, another 15 raise that much money and build an industrial-scale facility. Each of those, based on what I've been reading from our own projections as well as what others have said publicly, we're looking at something like 20,000 tons per year per company. That's a lot of meat and seafood, just to be clear. And if you add all of that up, that's 450,000 tons. It's almost 1 billion pounds a year. Amazing. And by the way, to my first point when I opened, that means 20 super successful companies, each cranking out $500 million a year in revenue. Awesome. I don't think even a couple years ago we would have been feeling so confident about the trajectory that this field is on. But I wanted to provide that in context of global seafood production in blue and global meat production in red. That together is a whopping 0.08% of global demand. So it's a heck of a start, no doubt. But what I wanted to explore today is how do we go faster? How do we put ourselves on the map for the IPCC? How do we convince people that we can actually do something that will have an impact this decade? And this isn't something that's 20 or 30 years down the track. The real deal is, yes, we're ready, but very small scale. And at least at Wildtype, what we're grappling with now is this transition from being an R&D company into a food production facility. And what that means is producing high quality products every single time that are safe, free of the things that we don't want to eat, like Listeria and E. coli, right? And that transition, at least for us, has been challenging, and it's something that we're actively working through right now. The other major thing that we're focused on, of course, is cost. We've made, at Wildtype and at, I'm sure every other company represented here, huge progress, down from tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per pound to sub 100 now for a lot of companies. But it's not enough. I actually think we need to aim for parity, if not lower, right? Let's make these foods even more accessible than they are. I mean, I have this dream about salmon, which is one of the most nutritious foods that we can eat, being as accessible nationwide as a Big Mac.
Just want to jump in here to say, last October, I drove from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and there's a Tesla charger in Cattleman City where all the truck stops are gas stations. And I stopped there and I wanted to eat something while my car was charging, and every single restaurant was a Taco Bell and McDonald's and Jack in the Box, like crappy fast food. Why? Because the subsidies, the prices of beef are so cheap. This is like the cheap crap is what people eat. This is what's common. This is what's everywhere. This is why you see terrible food everywhere, because that is the cheapest food available. This is why there's such a health crisis and an obesity problem in the United States, is because the most accessible cheap food, like if you can't afford to eat expensive food, you're going to eat the cheap food, and the only cheap food is really unhealthy for you. There's only one good restaurant, which was this Mexican place, so if you're in that area ever, go to the Mexican place. It's a million times better than any of the fast food junk. But the point is that even if all these fast food places go plant-based and have burgers that are made by Impossible Foods or Beyond Burger, it's still a bunch of fast food junk. And can we elevate the food experience and accessibility so people have access to fresh food in poor areas around the United States? I think that's a huge thing that is a promise of this technology, but if we can actually scale this technology up, we get rid of the McDonald's of the world and we actually bring healthier food that's cheap.
How awesome would that be? If like the cheapest foods were also the most nutritious, and I think that is the calling that we have, and we're not there yet. I think that's honestly like probably a decade journey before we start to see prices in that range.
20,000 tons was $500 million of revenue. So by my quick math, that's about a selling price of about $12 a pound. So if it's hundreds of dollars per pound now, what's the pathway? So first of all, is that correct that the intended selling price at retail is, or at wholesale rather, is $12 a pound? And if the COGS today are at hundreds of dollars a pound, like what's the path to getting down to a profitable $12 a pound price?
A great question. Yeah, that was intentional. So, and I want to be honest with what I said. I do think it's going to take some time before we're below cost. And so I think the journey that we're on over the next few years is one of a loss leader, right? To show people what's possible, build market share, get people excited about these products. And by the way, we're not the first company that would do that for the first few years. I think that's better than having a $100 burger, to be honest, at least in my opinion, because I want these products to be accessible to people. Yes, we should have them in a Michelin restaurant, and you should pay what they cost. We'll show that there's a market for that and there's demand for that, coming back to your question. I think there's a really big part of the demand curve that could sustain our current costs. But I also think it's important to show that, it's available in a grocery store, in a downscale market, in a quick service restaurant, for example. So that that was my intent. And others may have made faster progress than we have on cost reduction, but it is the journey. Like, that is the one thing that we're focused on, I'd say.
This is where we are today. Just like renewable energy, battery technology, so battery cost curves have come down incredibly over the past couple decades, which have enabled us to build incredible electric vehicles and scale up renewable energy storage, and that is happening more and more now. We have similar cost curves, definitely for precision fermentation, but hopefully also for cellular agriculture. So we started, 10, 20 years ago with a $100,000 burger or more, or the $100,000 piece of salmon, and now we're below $100, but we still have a long ways to go over the next 10 years to get the price of that to be $14, $12, $10, so that it's actually affordable. And if we can make it, the cheaper we can make it, the more accessible to everyone we can make that, hopefully creating a much better food system at the same time. Do you think it's possible to have a world where healthy, nutritious foods are more accessible than the McDonald's of the world, or are we kind of relegated to having a really unhealthy food system? Let me know in the comments, and have a good weekend. I'll see you in the next video.